And so with that, when we're looking at uncertainty, we're pushing into the kidneys that fear, that unsettle, and into the heart. Now, what's happening beyond that, if you look at it a little further, think about lungs. We look at lungs as boundary. Well, think about what's happening right now from that perspective with the boundaries. We have, you know, I think that Judge Clay Jenkins is doing a great job of trying to stay on top of this and giving us information that is solid. If you watch his newscast and stuff, he's unemotional, very clear, and giving us the information we need to make decisions that are in the best interest of everybody. I think he's doing a great job in a really, really difficult situation. So he's helping to nourish wisdom to help to quell the potential for fear, right? But there are boundary issues going on where right now I see a lot of people having trouble with the stay-at-home order, where they don't think it's a real big deal, or they're 2 weeks in and they're going stir crazy and they can't stand it. And it's, I'm not judging one way or the other. There's so many different reasons why somebody would be in that state and that fear. But they're basically, the boundaries are being pushed. We're being told to stay away from each other. That's not natural for humans. We tend to want to be in community. There's a lot of people that say they would live on a mountain alone, forever, but I've never seen that come to fruition. I've had a lot of veterans tell me that. I'd be fine if I just lived alone in the mountains, and then they go try it, and a couple of years later, they're back. So even if that long. But like the NSAIDs thing that we had, so that was a boundary issue. These are the drugs that I use to help maybe with chronic pain. Now all of a sudden I'm being told don't take them, right? Because you could die. Well, that's a major boundary issue, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And so in that situation, you think about it, the lungs are supposed to nourish the kidneys, but in this particular case, they're pushing the kidneys into a place of fear, right? So because my boundaries are being compromised, I'm driving into the kidneys with fear. I'm building that potential for fear because there's not a certainty here. There's not a stability. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so from that, then this relationship, it can go one of two ways. Most people go to anxiety. I don't go to anxiety. I go to anger. That's a liver energy. So I don't like shortcuts. So I go through anger. If I get angry enough, I'll probably build my anxiety. But that's been something I've been struggling with this week, is I feel so overwhelmed, so many different pressures coming from different places. I need to get this done. I need to get that done and that. And there's a lot of uncertainty and there's a lot of boundaries. People are feeling the same way and they're trying to push my boundaries as well. And unfortunately, my boundary tool is anger. And it's not that anger by itself is bad, but if I'm using it to push people away, that becomes problematic. That's hurtful. I hurt people that I care about, right? And so being able to see that's the first step, is being able to see it and connect with it so that I can start to look at how can I do something different. Several of you mentioned anxiety and fear and the sense of isolation and things like that. And those are all things that I want to kind of touch on today because I think it's really important. But understanding gives us, when we look at this flow, understanding it gives us the opportunity to be more objective. If we're simply reactionary, or we're just reacting to things all the time and not taking time either during or during or after to not beat ourselves up, but to assess, evaluate where's this coming from really? Think about the trigger pattern tool concept that we've talked about. Where's this coming from really, and understanding it. So I know when I'm what I'm learning, and I'm still in process here, but when I'm learning for myself what's going on this week, my boundaries are being challenged, right? We didn't hear back from the landlord. We sent him a letter last week, and we, like, okay, here's the situation. We had to close shop last Thursday. We didn't hear from him. He said, well, he sent an email, said, you'll be hearing from us soon. And it's like, what soon? How long? So there was uncertainty there, and we waited. We got a letter yesterday, and I'll talk about that at the end, if anybody cares. But the idea is that was an uncertainty. Then the uncertainty of what we were going to do with the business, and can we go virtual, and what's it going to take to do that? How are we going to manage that? All that falls on me. And, for the vast majority, Fane handles the financials and that kind of stuff, and she's doing a lot of work on that. But for me, the technology and all of that stuff is me. And getting inundated with possibilities and so what I found is, with all of that, and this isn't a pity party, I'm trying to use me as an example instead of picking on one of you guys. But in essence, I had all these things coming in at me all at once. And sometimes, people I care about are pushing me to do something because it's on their agenda, but it's not on mine yet, right? So there's that kind of thing going on. It's like, I don't want to push them away, but I've got to be able to find my own boundaries. And so when it gets inundating like that, for me, the thing that happens is I come in with anger, because it's like I feel like I'm being crowded, and so I start pushing back. And I realize, maybe more this week than I have ever, that this goes back to the bullying that I had when I was a kid. When I start feeling, and honestly, I've felt this feeling a lot at different circumstances in my life, when there was uncertainty and such, and then people are wanting things from me. So I don't have my footing, and people are wanting things from me. I'm having trouble holding my ground. Well, what does that feel like? I feel like I'm losing my footing. I feel like I'm losing my balance. And I hate that feeling. So I push back, right? Mm-hmm. And in that, I realized this week, maybe, last night into this morning, I realized it's about the bullying. Because in that bullying scenario, I didn't have a choice, and I didn't have a voice. And it created an environment where I felt hopeless, helpless, vulnerable to my circumstances, right? I felt like somebody else had control. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. This situation is very much like that. Not just for me, for everybody, to an extent, right? And so I'm going to ask you, I'm going to put some words up here on the board, but I'm going to ask you, what one-word answers, find a word that explains or helps to describe either how you're feeling or how you think the world is feeling with all of this coming down on us right now. Give me some words to play with.
Trapped.
Trapped? Okay.
Changed.
I'm sorry?
Changed.
Changed?
Yes, I have changed.
Okay.
Ungrounded.
Ungrounded. Okay. I'm going to put off balance. Anything else?
I think uncertain is another one. You mentioned it, and I think it's definitely there.
Okay.
Misunderstood.
Misunderstood. Okay. Anything else? Marcia?
Opportunity.
Sorry?
Opportunity. Somewhere in this, there's an opportunity.
There can be.
For something
That would
different.
be, yeah. You guys familiar with the Monty Python movie, Life of Brian? There's a song in that, I believe it's from Life of Brian, I'm almost certain, called it's Always Look on the Bright Side of Life. And I encourage you to look it up on YouTube, especially in the video clip, because I think that they start singing it when they're when they're being crucified on the cross. So yes, I mean, in difficulty is opportunity for sure. Right now I'm looking at, just the things that are making us feel overwhelmed. How about that one? Okay.
Lack of control is in there somewhere. That's a
Lack of control.
Lack of control.
So would that be helpless or hopeless? Helpless. Okay. Helpless.
Yeah. It's kind of in limbo, it's helpless. There's nothing we can do about what we're facing right now.
Limbo. How low can you go?
Other than the social distancing, I mean, that we're all doing.
Right. Well, something that's come to my mind with all of this, thank you for all of that. Something that's coming to my mind in all of this is I'm observing people are interpreting social distancing as social isolation. They're different.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, we're socializing,
Mm-hmm.
right? We may not be in physical proximity to each other, but I really enjoy this because I get to see you guys and I get to interact with you.
Mm-hmm.
We can share a smile or a laugh or a tear. We get to share in that way. So it's less isolating. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So there's a difference between the distancing and the isolating. And the thing that I find interesting from just kind of an observer perspective is we have more tools at our fingertips to reach out and be with people that matter to us anywhere on the planet. And yet we feel isolated. I find that's really, really interesting. Because I remember, and everybody on this call remembers a time when there was one phone in the house and it was tied to the wall and we all fought for it. Right? How long are you going to be? I got to make a call. Somebody's going to be calling. Oh, there was no call waiting either. If you called, line was busy. It's like, get off the phone. Somebody's going to call me. Right? So we've expanded that ability to communicate and connect with each other in a huge way. And yet our human connection still craves other. To me, I'm not doing this as a criticism. To me, it's a huge awareness of how important our human connections are, physical connections, energetically close to each other. It's like for a lot of people, this isn't enough because you can't feel each other. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
When we're in the same room sharing, most people don't perceive it, but we're sharing energy. We're in the same space and we're communing with each other's energy. In this kind of environment, even though we've got the tools and everything, unless you're really tuning into it, you're not able to connect as easily or as comfortably with other people's energy. Right? And that's where we start to get into, I think that's what's starting to come out of this, is the recognition that we need each other a lot more than we want to believe we do.
We were not born into the digital world. We were born into the material world. And that requires touch.
Yeah, the you know, the Tai Chi of it, if you will.
Yeah.
You know, the duality of it. And so looking at this again and kind of giving it these labels, if you will, what can we do individually to help ourselves in this time of challenge when we're feeling overwhelmed, like we're drinking from the fire hose? What are some of the things that we can do? Any ideas?
Well, first we can take advantage of all these. You know, I need to reload Skype. I need to reload all these ways that I can see my grandkids and all that stuff. You know, take advantage of the things that are out there, like you just said. And then when I was walking the other day, I went out, the birds were singing extra loud because it's spring. I started noticing nature. I started thinking about all the pictures of the United States and the world that I've seen lately have been in the color of yellow, orange, and red. And I started picturing spring greens, all the variations of greens. And I started picturing the map of the world with green and blue instead of yellow, orange, and red. And I'm making that part of a daily meditation now to see the world covered in spring green.
Okay, so that becomes a perspective,
Mm-hmm.
right? Shifting perspective.
Right.
One way that's very helpful for that, you know, with regards to, we need to stay on top of the news, right? We need to know what's going on because it's moving so fast. But the talking heads are sensationalizing, and everybody's got their own opinion. And in the military, they told me very clearly about opinions. Everybody's got one, and they all stink. Because I won't go any further than that, but trust me, that's where it goes. Opinions don't matter, you know. So when these, you know, there's a difference between seeing a news story and having a couple of people having a conversation about what they think that's about, what they think as soon as you start getting the opinions and all of that. I mean, I see newscasters talking to newscasters about medical issues. And quite frankly, what the hell do they know? They only know what they've been told. They don't have a scientific basis of understanding. So shut the front door and move on. The idea of finding balance in your information is critical. Think about wisdom versus knowledge. You know, all these people's opinions and stuff are knowledge. They're, you know, they may be well informed in a lot of ways, but it's still just their opinions and it's knowledge. Go for facts. Go for facts. Look for factual news sources. Like the only source that I have for my COVID-19 is Johns Hopkins. All right, I sent everybody that map that basically says this is what's going on right now. I'll be posting more information. You know, I'm probably going to put together a page on the website. I don't know. I don't know what the weekend's going to do for me, but looking for factual news sources that are informed. You know, basically look as close to the source as you can. Right? Don't depend on a newscaster to tell you about medical issues. You know, I've been in contact with UT Southwestern Medical School, people that I know there because they're doctors, they're infectious disease specialists. They're, you know, so I'm looking for the information that I can get as close to a source of knowledge as I can. I encourage you to do the same. It'll settle your nerves. You know, I get people talking to me and sending me these things that are, you know, that are scaring them, like the NSAIDs thing. You know, I had somebody send that to me today, and it's like, I hear you. And when I didn't know, I went and researched it. We may hear things that are fearful, that trigger us. Pause, breathe, and go find out. If it's something that's triggering fear in you, go find out. find the source. If it's medical, go to a medical source, CDC, NIH. Johns Hopkins has a command center up where they are, where they're focused on the global pandemic. I mean, they got a $2 million grant and they're putting it to the test. So they've got this command center up there. That's why I trust that source, because they're there 24/7. I've been in incident command centers. I know what they operate like. I've helped set some up. So it's a functional operation. There's a lot of information coming in from very valid sources. Those are the kinds of things you're looking for. Boundaries, if somebody, with the fear, people are say you've got your root system and you're strong, you're feeling good, but then somebody in your circle is terrified and unsettled and overwhelmed, and they're trying to impose their perspective, and it's like, why aren't you scared? You should be terrified, trying to impose their fear system on you or their anxiety on you. That's very, very common. It's a commiseration technique. And they can feel more isolated or rejected if you don't jump in the boat with them. The boat is sinking, please jump in with me, right? And I prefer to stand on the shore and say, your boat is sinking, let me teach you how to swim. Right? Or here's a cork, put that in the hole. It's not your job to take on other people's stuff. It's hard not to when it's somebody you care about, but it's not your job, and that's part of holding your own boundaries. Is what I'm saying triggering at all? Jean?
Yeah, that's, I mean, we're managing it right now, but yeah, that's kind of where I live. It's like, I don't want to take on somebody else's fear, but then I don't want to be cold and just shrug the other person off and act like I don't care. So it's always a balance.
And the challenge there is if they're bringing information that's fearful, what I try to do is I find information that is factual, that is as close to the source as possible, and not verbally give it to them, but like in text or email or something, say, here, look at this. This is related to what you were asking me about. Here it is. This is the best source I've found. If they choose not to look at it, if they choose to stay in that place of fear, that's on them, not on you.
Right. In my case, it's more to do with discussing what might happen. Well, to me, anything might happen, so I don't want to spend a lot of time discussing what might happen and let's get all afraid of it. So it's not usually dealing directly with facts for me.
That's interesting, because Fane and I have had that same scenario where I've wanted to discuss future and she didn't. So if you think about it from the way we've talked about that future focus here in the now, for me, and particularly because we've got so much liability in different, business ventures and clients and things like that, I need to be able to see as much of the bandwidth from worst case to best case that I can. That's important for me, right? It's really important for a lot of people. The difference is our survival depends on that kind of mindset of what's ahead, right? Living in the moment, purely in the moment, is very, very difficult when you live in the real world. We need to be present in the moment, but we need to be able to live moving forward, right? And so if I just sit on a cushion all day, they'll probably repo my house. So I need to, work. But if I, where I ran into some issues with Fane along the lines of what you're talking about is, for me, I started getting to that place of not panic, but pressure of, I need to plan as far ahead as I can. I need to see what possibilities are there. I need to set a plan in place and move forward. That's me. That's what I have to do. I'm looking at worst case scenario, and can I survive that worst case scenario? Right? And so I'm looking at that and looking at what would that look like? How would I, so for me, worst case scenario is we lose the center, right? Well, what does that look like? I'm not panicking about it. I'm not afraid. I'm not putting emotion into it, but I am putting thought there because I need to understand what would that look like. And if I can get comfortable with that, if I can get comfortable with this worst case scenario for me, from a business perspective, right? That's the worst case from a business perspective. If I can get comfortable with that, if I can put some plans in place that say, all right, well, I'm not going to think in detail, but I'm going to say, all right, worst case, now here's a few steps that I'll take. I can see light at the end of that tunnel. Done. Right? Now, best case is they lift the order tomorrow and we're back to work. Not going to happen, but that would be best case, right? Now, obviously, there is a worst case from a personal level that trumps everything on this board, is if somebody in my family or somebody I care about falls ill with this and passes away. That's real worst case, right? So what that does is that totally shifts this perspective. And I want to show you how. So before, this was my window. Can you see that? This was my window of perspective. Oh my God, I might lose the center. Okay? Because it's our livelihood. How am I going to support my family? Are we going to be homeless? It was that mindset, right? So here's the next. This is a perspective shift of worst case. What if somebody in my family dies? Look at what happened to my worst case business loss. It's now kind of middle of the road. Very much about perspective. How stressful or how painful or difficult the situation is very much about where you look. Because the other side of that is my son, Jaden, is outside of Atlanta with his girlfriend and their family, and they're managing, new normal with online teaching or online school to graduation and that. But something he didn't have in his dorm room was a dog and a cat, and he loves animals, and that makes him happy. And he's with family and he gets to cook, which is another thing that makes him happy. And so they're making the best of a difficult situation, and they're together. And so, it becomes about this, what's the real perspective? So when you're looking at grounding, it's not just about looking at worst case scenario and living in that moment. I'm not shifting my mind, my energy. If I shift my energy here, where I'm living out this experience in my mind, in my heart, in my body, then I'm in a state of overwhelm. Does that make sense?
Yes.
But if I stay grounded, if I stay here and I stay rooted, really rooted, and I'm able to simply look and make plans and organize to the best of my ability. I don't have all the answers. And then here's the big word for it, trust. I want to build trust that in no matter where I am in this line, it will be okay. And if you think about it back into this scenario, we had kidney fear, right? Pushing into heart anxiety, chaos. Lungs were pushing in because I was getting a lot of boundary issues, right? And where did I go? I went to the grandmother. I went to spleen, trust. And the spleen took control of the kidneys. It also started to work with the lungs for boundaries, because what I did was I'm setting boundaries here. My perspective is setting boundaries. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I grounded here. I start to set boundaries and see what's going to happen, what potentials are there, but I'm doing it from a grounded place. So that's giving me that earth energy that I need to work into healthy boundaries for myself, which then settles the fear, which then starts to reduce the anxiety. Ta-da!
I need colored pencils.
Questions on this?
You're putting that on YouTube, right?
I didn't start recording till I started talking, so I'll probably do it. I have to see, but yeah, most likely.
Oh, I can take a screenshot.
Yeah, you can. Let me get out of the way.
No. Oh yeah, I need that.
Thank you, Chris,
Right.
for taking care of that Advil story.
You're welcome.
That was going everywhere.
It is, and it's not that there's not some concern, but it's not to the level where, I mean, it gets really complicated because you're talking about ACE inhibitors and that kind of thing, and some people react differently to ACE inhibitors than others. They work in the body. They're very important, but it gets so complicated. It's not an all or nothing thing. Like, you know, I could stand here and say, okay, and I see people doing this. This is the best Qigong practice on the planet, and it will protect you from COVID-19. And that's dangerous. It's just not wise to be telling people this. Qigong is a very, very powerful tool for strengthening. Hi, Kat. Hi, Kathleen. Qigong is a very powerful tool for increasing oxygen uptake, strengthening the cellular oxygen levels, increasing lymphatic circulation, stimulating blood flow through all the parts of the body, right? These are really important parts of how the body maintains balance and stays healthy. There are techniques that can help strengthen. So like you'll see some lung techniques and such. Well, that's fine, right? Lung techniques are good, but what if lung is not your problem, right? What if kidneys are the problem? What if heart is the problem? You kind of talk through how being uprooted has pushed the heart into a state of overwhelm. Right? And so if I try to focus just on the heart, then I'm not solving the underlying problem. So what's my favorite saying when somebody asks me if this will solve everything?
It depends.
I don't know.
It depends. It depends. It really depends. And so when you're looking, the most important thing to do, rest, hydration, interaction with people, really mindful of the news feeds, and stay with factual information, not subjective opinion masters and talking heads. They're in this time of concern and everything, they're a waste of oxygen, in my opinion. And I don't care which side of the aisle it is, they're all wasting oxygen. So give yourself permission to show up in life, nature. We've been playing board games. I think the next one on the agenda is pandemic.
Play that. Don't play that.
Oh,
My neighborhood is taken to walking, and I haven't had a walk in the last couple of days, but that's really helpful to walk out there, and they're staying 6 feet apart, but it helps me to just feel like, oh, there are other people in the world now. It's not as quiet as it sounds like when I'm in the house. We don't have cars going by. I mean, it sounds like we're the only 2 people in the world, but getting outside the door and talking to the neighbors as they walk by at 6 feet is good.
Right.
Helps. Yeah.
There was a story on NPR this morning about that. They were talking to a woman who she's an architect, and she was talking about social distancing from a perspective of, and this is something I've said many, many years ago, because a friend of mine made a documentary called Subdivided, and if you can find it, look for it. I helped him with it. I'm actually in it in a cameo, but it's about how this, used to be like in the New York City kind of environment where everybody was, in close proximity, everybody knew everybody's business, and they talked all the time and all of that. And then as everybody moved out of the cities and into the suburbs, we became more and more isolated. And I've always felt like when houses stopped having front porches and people driving in the back to the garage, we just became very isolated that way as well. Mm-hmm. And so if you don't have a front porch, take your lawn chairs and throw them on the front yard and wait for people to come by. Throw water balloons at them. That'll get them talking.
Yeah. I told my daughter we were going to bring lawn chairs over to her house, and my 9-year-old grandson can sit out on the porch and play the violin for us. I need to see him though.
Yeah. It's a challenging time, and many of the people that I work with are at risk. And I mean, really pretty much with this, everybody's at risk, but there are, there's groups that are more at risk. And so really, really be mindful of that. But any other questions? Well, as always, thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you.
And you should be able to, you'll see some changes over the weekend with an email and website changes and things. I'm working to get all of that stuff squared away so we can continue this. As far as like the practices and such, we'll be doing private lessons. Okay, Gloria, I see you.
Okay.
Private lessons, I'm looking at doing like 15-minute and 30-minute private lessons. So if you wanted to do some detailed work on the Dallas 5 or something like that, we could do that.